Hello everyone, I'm Kit Cabello and welcome again to a very special episode of Chicago Corner. The gentleman sitting next to me is a longtime guest, activist, community organizer, and now he's again running for office for the 7th Illinois Congressional District, Anthony Clark. And before I introduce you, my friend, you've been on our show when we've been on radio and public television, and we have this kind of like a little inside joke to where you're like, hey, you know, you might be our most interviewed person, and as it stands right now, you are tied with former Illinois State Senator and former governor candidate Daniel Biss. You have finally got there. You're number one. You're tied for number one. You're tied for number one.
I feel like I'm bringing in a trophy now. I'm holding it up. Quick speech. But no, seriously, all jokes aside, you know, the fact that the role Heartland's media plays, you know, within the community, giving exposure to grassroots candidates, giving exposure to grassroots efforts, you know, it's extremely important. So to understand or recognize that I've played a role in being a guest and, you know, collaborating with you all, it means a lot, you know, because at times when no one would listen to me, you know, when no one would amplify the message of the movement, you all provided that outlet. So I truly appreciate it.
I just wanted to add down to that, you know, we here at Heartland Media, we make it our point to really give the voice to community organizers and activists. And since we're now doing this show, we want to definitely give more coverage and talk to people as well. But when we were starting off early on, the one thing that always impressed us that we always talked about is the people, the leaders that are stepping up. And we always say, like, hey, get involved, step up. And Anthony Clark, you're an example of that. So I think for our viewers, especially now that we're live streaming on YouTube channel, we got a whole new audience. Please introduce yourself to our viewers and subscribers. Kind of give us a background to your history as being an activist, being in the military, a veteran as well, and also running for office again.
Sure. So for those who are not aware, you know, of Anthony Clark or the Anthony Clark movement, because again, it's not just me, it's we. I'm a teacher, special education teacher. I'm going to my 10th year of high school teaching. Generally, I teach history, English, or math. But prior to that, you know, I graduated high school in 2001. Briefly moved to Atlanta, attempting to find myself, as many of us do. At that time, I did not find myself. I was looking in many places and ended up going into the military. So I served 6 years active duty. You know, I'm an individual that grew up in a two-parent home. They're still together. You know, neither are college educated, but they imparted on me the importance of giving back, you know, and serving others. You know, service to others is the rent we pay for room here on this earth. You know, that's a Muhammad Ali quote that, you know, we truly believe in, and my grandfather imparted on my father imparted on me. So I've always been cognizant of that, of how do we give back? You know, even as a black male, even as a member of an oppressed class, I still recognize certain levels of privilege I have, you know, coming from a two-parent home, having certain supports. So how could I give back? And, you know, as I matured, you know, from leaving the military service to entering into teaching, teaching within CPS, you know, alternative, charter, public, and now at a public suburban school, you know, within the Chicagoland area, Oak Park Workforce High School. You know, it appeared on Stars Network, the documentary America to Me. You know, if you want to see my teaching style, I'm in episode 8. You know, as the kids say, Google me. But again, you know, my life has just been essentially dedicated to, you know, serving others, giving back, and recognizing that based upon, you know, this capitalistic society that we live in, that essentially counts on a top and a bottom, you know, counts on poverty, counts on unemployment, counts on individuals struggling in order to maintain, you know, capitalism and maintain a top, a superior class. What can I do to not only help people, but go beyond treating symptoms to treating root causes and truly helping people and then empowering them so they no longer need help, if that makes sense. So, you know, that's taken me, you know, throughout the city, throughout the state, throughout the country. In 2017, I was nominated through Brand New Congress Justice Democrats based upon the work that I do as a teacher. You know, I'm the founder and director of a nonprofit, Suburban Unity Alliance. We do a lot of equity work. Again, I don't believe in individual accolades, but I was the Village of the Year in 2016, you know, based upon the work that I do. And I think that led into, you know, the community nominating me to run for office. I never considered myself a politician. You know, I myself was jaded at a point in time and frustrated with our representation. But, you know, once I was nominated and truly talked with my parents, talked with my friends, talked with the community that had nominated me, you know, I truly identified this as an opportunity to, again, take the micro, treating symptoms, and expand it to the macro, and address root causes, because at the end of the day, and I'll leave it here, I don't think anything can change on a systemic level until we attack and change policy.
So then I want to actually ask you on this, because this is a very unique perspective that you and I actually share. We're both veterans.
Correct.
And we both served in the military. And again, you are running for office. So one of the sad facts, though, about a lot of our fellow brothers and sisters in arms is that veteran suicide rates are up. There's a lack of employment. There's a lack of educational opportunities, and there's a lot of things that are just basically there's a lack of resources to help veterans. And as you and I seem to be very lucky in the fact that we're still here, we had a lot of support and people helping us out. So as being a veteran running your campaign, how does that mindset really help you out in regards to running for office, and also what does it tell you about the current situation of veterans in the United States who desperately need help, but are being ignored by a government that says they support the troops only until they come home?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I'm a disabled veteran. I served 6 years active duty. I retrieved my treatment at Hines VA, medical facility within the local community. And I served 6 years, so I got out in 2009, transitioned. And the first thing I think about, as someone who's involved in politics now, as someone who's involved with boots to the ground efforts, is the difference between, theory in a sense and practice. And how do we define thoughts? I think if you look at this present administration, their idea of patriotism essentially is, a nationalistic viewpoint, warmongering, bigger, badder, better, in a sense of let's take all of our funding and just push it into an industrial military complex. We see that as well with our police departments, throughout the nation. But I feel like true patriotism, truly caring about your country, I think you display that by how you treat your veteran population.
Absolutely. And what's happening in the city, especially in Chicago, we have a high veteran homelessness population.
You recognize that. Studies show, there's data out there that states that, individuals that are on the ground, they estimate that we're at about 80,000 individuals that are homeless. And that counts for individuals that are also doubled up, that we don't even necessarily consider. And those are individuals that may live in someone else's home temporarily, on the couch, on the floor, so on and so forth. And they're transitioning from home to home. 80,000 individuals. So again, you have an administration, you have a government who is consistently, I call it propaganda at times, pushing propaganda out there to celebrate the military, celebrate those that serve their country. Of course, we're in Memorial Day holiday. Right. But yet and still, we have veterans that come home, and as you stated, they're lacking comprehensive support. The wait times are extremely high. I know this current administration, they're doing a lot to try to privatize many of the assistance and help that our veterans receive. But then what happens is now you're bringing in, again, and we know privatization within a capitalistic world, it's about profit, it's not about people. So now you're bringing in companies and organizations that have no idea of the experiences veterans go through.
And nor should they be involved, because it doesn't fit in the idea of what's a profit-driven industry.
Exactly. A profit-driven industry does not have the capacity to truly treat veterans and their veterans' needs. So we're dealing with that. We're dealing with that issue of privatization of veteran outreach. We're dealing with the situation of veteran homelessness. Mental health support is lacking. There's extreme wait times. We've heard stories of veterans calling and seeking help, but yet and still it takes so long for them to receive it, they may take their life. They may develop suicidal ideation. So our veteran population, they're extremely struggling. And it's interesting how, we have a nation where many individuals can focus on someone kneeling, calling out, peacefully kneeling, calling out the systemic issues that exist in our country, which I consider a form of patriotism. That's why I honestly fought. I fought for individuals to have their right to speak up, their right to protest. We can get up in arms about that. We can have millions of people posting about that, Colin Kaepernick or anyone else, but we can't get up in arms and demand change from our government in regards to how we're treating our veteran population. So we definitely, again, and I think it's an interconnected issue. I think that's why we have to push for single-payer healthcare, because I think that also helps our veteran population. I think we have to address housing as a human right. Look what's happening with HUD right now and the different things they're doing, impacting immigrant populations, LGBTQI plus populations, and it's also impacting our veteran populations. So we have to look at the interconnected issues that lead to the symptoms that we see, because oftentimes we're focused on the symptoms.
So now let's actually focus on the 7th Illinois Congressional District. You are running again. You ran a very tough campaign in 2018. We actually interviewed you a few times when we were on radio and public television. But you're running up against an incumbent who's been in office for a very long time. Correct. Danny Davis, whose slogan for last campaign, Danny Davis, a name you know.
Correct.
So you're going up against someone who's in the establishment, and for our viewers, let's kind of get a background on what who Danny Davis is, what he's done, and really why you are the more qualified candidate to replace him.
Definitely. And I think, again, it's always going to tie back into what does it mean and what does it look like to treat root causes. And I think we've gotten to the point in 2019 to where we have 45 in office and where we have so many individuals uncomfortable and upset with where we are as a society, because for far too long we've allowed individuals to simply exist. The narrative with individuals like Danny K. Davis and others is, well, they're Democrats and they vote the right way.
Or they're supposed to.
Right, they're supposedly vote the right way. But what if we peel back those layers, and truly identify and study and recognize how, quite honestly, even as a Democrat, the Democratic Party has failed oppressed classes of people.
Okay.
The Democratic Party has failed. So Danny K. Davis is an individual who at times votes the right way, even though he voted with the Republican Party to repeal some of the protections within Dodd-Frank. He made that mistake. He was not for the legalization of cannabis in 2018. We were pushing for a connection with racial justice. He was not for that. So he's not boots to the ground. He's not connected to the community. But essentially, again, he's a Democrat and he votes the right way. So I think we need to separate voting the right way from fighting the right way. Because if we want to move forward, it's going to take more than just a vote. It's going to take individuals that are boots to the ground, building coalitions, working with individuals, within multiple communities, focused on bridge building, coalition building, empathy, and truly fighting for, I think, the soul of our nation.
So then here's a follow-up to that, because we did a sit-down interview with Marie Newman, who's running for the Illinois 3rd Congressional District, and her opponent will be Dan Lipinski, who's very conservative, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-women. And as it currently stands right now, the DCCC has made these two statements, speaking on both ends of their mouth. They're for diversity and unique difference of opinions, but then at the same time, they're saying we got to support the incumbents. We got to support the incumbents, because if we have another AOC or Ro Khanna or Tulsi Gabbard or anyone else, Ilhan Omar, to challenge the system, it's going to upset everything, and that's not how things are done. Have you received any pushback from the DCCC? And I kind of want to get your comments in regards to their saying that they want diversity, but then they say we got to support the incumbents, so that means you got to support Danny Davis. So I want to get your comments on the DCCC.
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, if we want to truly be honest with ourselves and recognize the role the Democratic Party has played historically in getting us to the point that we're at in 2019, we have to also be honest in stating that the Democratic Party has perpetuated white supremacy, patriarchy, so on and so forth. So I think what the Democratic Party, the DCCC, does at times is they're consistently placing party and individualism above people and collectivism. So at the end of the day, they're focused on maintaining power, maintaining the structure that's in place, the machine. And what you see now is individuals like myself from a grassroots level, we don't owe anyone. We don't have to scratch anyone's back. No one got us to the point that we're at in regard to influence. We've, again, started with just rolling our sleeves up and getting into the community. So that's extremely dangerous for them because they can't control us. Individuals like Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Presley, and so on and so forth. You cannot control individuals that are not beholden to, PACs, are not beholden to corporations and lobbyists. So that threatens status quo. Because again, at the end of the day, I think it's essentially the same game. It's just a different design in regards to the Republican Democratic Party, because they count on our vote. They count on the black vote, they count on the LGBTQI plus vote, but they don't count on our empowerment, if that makes sense. So someone like Danny Davis is not going to rock the boat. Someone like Danny K. Davis is not going to push them and demand that they change. He's not going to get out in front and lead efforts like the Green New Deal, which we need in regards to addressing climate change. He's not going to necessarily lead efforts in regard to single-payer healthcare. He's not going to lead efforts and be dynamic like we are in our campaign, calling for the legalization of cannabis with a focus on racial justice, or the decriminalization decriminalization of sex work or housing as a human right. We can go on and on. There's a difference between sitting back and seeing how the party shifts and moves and fighting and moving with and shifting with the community.
So I actually want to get your talk about some of your policies, because there is a very good chance, a potential chance, we've seen it happen with AOC being elected in 2018, where you could become the potential new congressional representative of the 7th Illinois Congressional District. So you are fighting for protecting the LGBTQI rights, also protecting women's rights, as we all seen what's happened in Missouri and Alabama, where women's right to do whatever she wants to her body, or for it's basically her own sovereignty is being taken away from her.
Correct.
And then at the same time, we're seeing extreme, I guess the establishment's turning a blind eye to climate change and its impact. So what kind of legislation for these three issues right now are you prepared to bring before the United States House?
Correct.
And really, what are you prepared to do to get them passed? Because not only do you have to deal with Republican establishment pushback, but there's also people within the Democratic establishment that will push back and say, no, we're going to play it safe.
Right. See, what's interesting, you know, and again, I want to be careful with the terminology that I utilize, you know, as a veteran as well. But I think we're in an ideological war. This is warfare. And I don't think people necessarily, a lot of people understand it, but many people don't. And when someone, you know, approaches, you know, whether they're from the DCCC, so on and so forth, and they're pushing, you know, a centrist mantra, you know, we have to be centrist, you know, we have to work both sides. And I don't think there's any middle ground in regard to human rights. And I'm a teacher, so I'm going to give a brief history lesson if you don't mind. And again,
go ahead.
This is an I statement, so I'm not speaking for anyone else. But the mindset that I come from is, again, we have a nation built upon genocide and enriched by the enslavement of Africans and African descendants, chattel slavery. Capitalism, you know, it counts on and pushes a free market. It counts on and pushes individualism, grabbing yourself up by the bootstraps. But what is a free market to individuals that are not free? In a capitalistic society, you have to have a top and a bottom.
Right.
And throughout history, what has occurred, whether it's the genocide that has occurred with natives, whether it's the enslavement of Africans, whether it's the oppression of Black Americans and women and so on and so forth, the LGBTQI plus community, how has that essentially been justified? And I'm not talking necessarily about the individuals that are directly attacking and directly applying that oppression. I'm also talking about the individuals that have often stood by the sidelines and been complicit. You know, we mentioned earlier, again, the anti-abortion movement that's occurring in many of our states.
Right.
Some women are writing that legislation.
There was a governor in Alabama who actually wrote it.
There's women that are voting for that legislation. So what are we doing for the individuals, and how are we addressing the individuals that are complicit? In order to maintain a capitalistic society built upon oppression, you have to be able to convince people that someone else, because they are different, is less than you.
Beware of the other.
Exactly. They are less than you. So throughout history, science and religion have been utilized to try to justify, yes, slavery exists, but they're not human. They're subhumans, you know. Yes, we're attacking immigrants populations, but they're, again, bad hombres. They're rapists. They're murderers. They're drug dealers. Yes, you know, women are having abortion, but they're killing lives. They're killing babies. This anti-abortion movement is not about babies. Because if you want to break it down, if the Republican Party and anyone that's pushing this type of rhetoric truly wanted to reduce the number of abortions, then they would invest in organizations like Planned Parenthood. They would invest in education, because data shows when you have an educated society, when you have a society that has access to health care, abortion rates drop.
Right. So then I want to get your stance. Where do you stand on single-payer healthcare? Where do you stand on the issue that you have Americans who, can go into debt or become homeless because of one bad day, because they're unable to pay the hospital bills?
Yeah, no question. So again, we have to make it clear. I think we're at a point in time where you have to draw a line in the sand and let voters, let community members know what you believe in and what you're fighting for. So I'm 100% for single-payer healthcare. I know many individuals are trying to still push the ACA. I know many individuals are trying to push forward a public option. But one person at the end of the day without healthcare is one too many. That should be a human right. At the end of the day. So we have to have a single payer system. Again, we have to eliminate competition. Regulatory competition always creates a bottom, always creates an oppressed class. So single payer healthcare is a must. The Green New Deal, where we're getting away from fossil fuels, the usage and dependence upon fossil fuels, where we're addressing carbon emissions, where we're moving toward, smart grid. This is extremely important because not only is it addressing the issues, but it's creating job opportunities as well within our communities. So that's extremely important. Again, the Equality Act. That they just passed through the House, but now it's city, because again, I don't think it's going to pass through the Senate right now. But we have to look at the discrimination that exists in our trans community, particularly our Black trans woman community, our LGBTQI plus community overall. It's interesting that we don't consider that, okay, we have laws and policies in place, but look at this discrimination that still exists in regulatory industries, where you may not get housing, where you're going to get discriminated with job opportunities. And that kind of ties into why I'm in support of the decriminalization of sex work, because I truly believe you cannot be for workers' rights, for women's rights, for trans rights, or for overall the LGBTQI plus rights if you don't address the decriminalization of sex work.
This is all very interconnected because we talked about the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex, and precisely how the prison industrial complex profits off of the war on drugs as well as the war on sex workers. I mean, sex work is illegal in majority parts of the United States. Drugs, including cannabis, even if it's legalized in a said state, like for Colorado, for example, it's still deemed as a federal crime. But again, this has to deal with the fact that there's lobby groups that want to continue these policies.
Exactly.
So on your campaign website, you have talked about reforming campaign finance laws, and that basically has to address with Citizens United and the McCutcheon's decision. So these two issues have basically turned our democracy into an oligarchy, to where money is speech and corporations are people. So as a potential new congressman for the 7th Illinois Congressional District, what are you prepared to do to challenge Citizens United and get rid of the McCutcheon's decision at the same time?
Yeah, definitely. I think first and foremost, it has to start with educating our community. Just as you stated and just as you shared, I don't think most citizens, and again, I'm using most, and I don't want to say that, but I think, again, the establishment is able to get away with or push their rhetoric or push these policies because they're counting on a lack of voter education. They're counting on voter suppression. And this is not only the Republican Party, but this is the Democratic Party as well. At the end of the day, how can you say that you represent people, that you're fighting for people, if you're being influenced by money from corporations that place profit before people? So the Citizens United issue, the McCutcheon's issue, we have to really address and attack campaign finance reform. Because again, take myself for an example as a grassroots candidate. You remember, going through the 2018 campaign cycle with, we're doing individual donations. We beat the incumbent in regard to individual single person to person donations because they don't have to focus on that. They don't truly have to door knock. They don't truly have to get into the community and truly connect with community members because they're already counting on hundreds of thousands of dollars coming from pharmaceutical companies, coming from various lobbyists that, again, are placing profit first.
And then doing those cheap lines where a name you know.
Exactly, a name you know. And they only show up when it's election season. Meanwhile, we're boots to the ground on a daily basis. So we need to address these issues and create a platform to where, one, I truly believe that we need campaign finance in regard to where grassroots candidates, incumbents, we're all on a level playing field. So
in our chat, I've actually noticed a few people talking about, like, hey, they're really impressed with your campaign, they're really interested in you as an individual, but there's talk about how close it was for you in your last election cycle between Danny Davis in 2018. So how close was that race? Because if we just rewind back the clocks even to the 3rd Illinois Congressional District, where Marie Newman was going up against Dan Lipinski in the primary, some of her votes ended up missing, and we've talked about this in the show where Illinois has some very shady election rigging, and I think our viewers want to know just how close that previous race was between you and Danny Davis.
So we got about 28% of the vote. We were near 30%, and what I want to tell viewers is, understand that. I mean, Barack Obama, if you're a fan of Barack, he lost his first, campaign in regards to going against Bobby Rush. Tony Preckwinkle, others. You can name individuals that have lost repeatedly prior to winning. I'm not saying I'm a fan of these. I'm just saying as an example.
Well, how about Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, exactly. Bernie Sanders, perfect example.
A couple of examples.
Perfect example. because you're going against an establishment, because you're going against a machine, because you do not have the money that individuals within office have, they're counting on that name recognition built and protected by that establishment. So it takes running. It may take running twice. It may take running 3 times to truly break through. Our first time running, I'll be honest with you, I'm a huge boxing fan. I mentioned Muhammad Ali earlier. The way I kind of look at it is we were kind of like Cassius Clay prior to becoming Muhammad Ali. We were an untrained fighter. We had the passion, we had the skill, we had the message. But prior to that, I was a teacher, a nonprofit director, and, I fought in the community for issues, so on and so forth. But I never ran a campaign in my life. But again, we were there because we believed, and we still believe. But based upon what we learned from that first election cycle, how the DCCC responds, how they try to marginalize and silence your voice in regard to on the ground, not pushing for debates, stealing your campaign signs, the physical harassment, the verbal harassment that takes place, and then on the macro level, not providing you with van access, so you have viable data, so you know how to target your voting base, so on and so forth. We've been through that. The challenges, I spent over $11,000 battling signature challenges that the incumbent lobbied against us, and we beat each challenge. But again, that caught us up within the court system for at least 4 months, and we ended up spending hard-earned, hard-donated $11,000 to beat that. But now that we have that experience, again, we're like a trained fighter now. We know how to better control the ring. We know how to punch and take a punch and counter punch. You see what I'm saying? Yes. We know how to move around.
So the 7th Illinois Congressional District, though, is a very large district.
Correct.
And it's filled with a wide range of diverse people from different backgrounds. And of course, when you're on the ground, you're knocking on doors and you're talking to voters, asking them to come out and vote for you so that you can win the primary and go into the general election in 2020. What is the response from the community, and how does it differ from what you went through in 2018? Right. You talked about how you're a fighter and your training and how things have changed. What are you hearing from the community now that you're knocking on doors, and what's the difference?
Yeah, I believe in a different segment you had, Heartlands, you mentioned that Illinois, the state of Illinois, we're either number 1, 2, or 3 in regard to individuals.
We're fourth corrupt state.
Fourth corruption, but I'm also discussing individuals moving out of the state.
Yes.
We're high up on that list. So I have so many individuals that are just tired. Honestly, they don't know what else to do in the sense of, because that narrative is often out there that, those on the bottom, they're lazy. They don't want to work. I meet individuals on a daily basis working 3 and 4 jobs, care about their children just the same as somebody that's wealthy, not knowing if their child's going to come home at the end of the day, wondering how they're going to bring groceries home because there's food deserts throughout their community, so they have to often travel into another community that may have issues in regards to police and community relations. So all these issues exist. Lack of job opportunities. The 7th Congressional District has 16.4% unemployment rate. That's 4 times the national average. Lack of infrastructure investment. School closures, mental health facility closures. People are fed up, but they're fighting. But again, you understand, if you get to a point where you're exhausted. You fought 15 rounds, you fought 16 rounds, and you just had enough. So that's what I'm encountering, and that's what I'm running into. They're ready and they're hungry for change. But too often, because again, I think how the establishment works, unfortunately, I know some politicians that started out being passionate, started out with dynamic and bold ideas. But what the machine does, it sucks you in. And essentially kind of eats you up and tells you, well, you got to wait your turn.
So now, as an educator, as a veteran, what does it mean to you, though, to actually potentially win this seat? And what are you prepared to do as soon as you go into Washington, D.C. or in Congress and actually, sit down in that seat? It's a seat of key power where a lot of decisions are being made. And as it stands right now, a lot of people are aware of just how corrupt our neoliberal system is. And I think when we put people to office, we expect them to be, okay, what are you going to do? Or how is this going to change you? So so what your mindset in this race, what does it mean to you as an individual and as an educator? Because you mentioned you were on a documentary, and in the 8th episode, we see your teaching skills. And I actually saw some clips of it. And then way to represent Chicago, way to represent the state of Illinois, because we need more people like you out there. What does it mean to you that you carried all these titles and now you're going into this race again?
It means everything to me, because everything that I do, everything that I engage in, at the end of the day, the first and last individuals I think about are my students. You know, am I going on 10 years of teaching? I've lost 11 students to gun violence. I still wear, you know, the closest student I had on my wrist, Elijah Sims, who lost his life a day before his 17th birthday, murdered.
I'm very sorry.
You know, and I consider his mother, Sharita Sims, who was a fighter, who was out there, you know, a true ally. You know, she's my sister in arms. But again, how are we preparing this nation, whether it's climate change, whether it's healthcare, whether it's police brutality, you know, whether it's gun violence, which should be a public health issue? How are we preparing and leaving this world for our youth? As a teacher, and I think we're all teachers, mind you, whether your title is teacher or not, our role is to educate and prepare for the future. Global citizens, and we're not doing that. So for me, everything that I do, why I'm out there consistently, why I cannot give up, why I'm willing to give my life for this effort, is because I want to prepare, model for our students, and show them that you don't have to sit back and politely wait for your human rights. You don't have to politely knock on the door and hope that somebody comes and opens it and changes. You can change for yourself. You can kick that door down. You don't have to wait anymore. And I think that's the most important message, and I think that's the mindset that I'm bringing into Congress. Again, there's so many wonderful representatives right now pushing forward progressive ideals and progressive policies. I'm going to get behind them and support them. I'm going to push for greater policy as well, introduce new policy. But I would consider 2 years or 4 years or however long I'm in office of truly fighting, speaking truth to power, and educating the community as more effective than 20 years of status quo. And that's important.
So I want to get your comment on this too. There's a lot of concern in regards to its pushing forward and actually trying to implement change. But and this is a two-part question, really. For our viewers and subscribers who are perhaps feel jaded, like we felt in regards towards not being involved in this political system, what do you want to say to those that are sitting in the sidelines, choosing not to get involved? And then the second part, I'm noticing a lot of positive comments from our chat in the live stream chat. People want to know more about you. Where can I find you on social media? So two-part question. What do you want to say to people who are jaded by the system and just sitting in the sidelines, choosing not to get involved? And then second part, where can people, our viewers, learn more about your campaign and find you on social media?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, you know, I want to let individuals know that I understand and I hear them in regard to being jaded, because I was once jaded. I was once one of those individuals that did not vote. I'll be completely honest, because I didn't see anyone running for office or in office that truly spoke to or represented me or individuals that I knew or know. But it comes to a point to where we have to understand that's what they want. Whoever the opposition may be, that's by design, in the sense of keeping us disengaged, keeping us from voting. If we see an issue, we can either sit back and hope and, again, wait for someone else to address it, or we have to understand and recognize, again, if we truly want to change things on a systemic level, we have to be the fighters. Because too often, I think throughout history, we've fallen into that narrative of, well, I voted for that policy. So perfect example. Slavery ended officially for me Juneteenth 1865. You know, we celebrate that as the emancipation. You know, there were still slaves in Texas after the Emancipation Proclamation. But it just shifted through slavery by a new name. You know, with our industrial prison complex, the disproportionate numbers of black and brown individuals representing our prison populations, often for nonviolent offenses. But again, integration occurred. Civil rights movement in the 60s, women's suffrage movement occurred, so on and so forth, right? Greater rights for women. But where do we see ourselves now in 2019? We can't just simply vote for a policy or vote for an individual and then expect things to change and then complain when they don't. We have to recognize the role we play in a democracy. We should have the power. And if we don't, we have to fight to gain that power back and to wield it. So what I tell people, I challenge individuals. Not everybody's going to be an Anthony Clark. Not everybody's going to be a kid. You know, Martin Luther King, again, I know it's funny because so many people, particularly liberals and progressives, love to quote him. And I think so many people don't realize when he was alive, he was one of the most hated individuals in America. But of course, they rewrote that narrative. But one of his quotes that I love is, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. So I want to challenge each and every listener, watcher, believer in the movement out there. go to a mirror, look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what am I willing to truly risk and sacrifice for change? How can I move it forward, whether I'm crawling or whether I'm flying? But at the end of the day, if I'm not happy with my life, if I'm not happy with the life of my family, my friends, or the community, I have to play a role. Right. You know, there's no Superman, Superwoman, or Super They out there caping up. There's a lot of people think they are. They cape up and think they can save us. There's no heroes. I know Avengers Endgame just came out. I don't know if you saw it. I saw it 6 times and cried 6 times. I was emotional.
Yeah, there's a couple scenes.
I was emotional. Hey,
I agree with you.
I'm Iron Man. I mean, come on. It got you. But there's no Avengers out there.
Right, it's only us.
We have to be the Avengers. So we have to be Black Widow, Captain America, whoever you think. We have to be that. So that's the message that I put out to individuals. We are the superheroes. And don't allow the establishment, don't allow the Democratic or Republican Party to make you think any different and to make you think that that individual you voted for is a superhero, because they're only, yet again, a man, woman, or they that you voted for. But they still work for you, and you still can hold them accountable, and you can still vote their asses out of office. Excuse my language.
That's fine. Don't worry about it. So again, real quick, on social media, what's the campaign website? Where can we find it?
So on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, it's Anthony V. Clark. You can learn more about the movement there. We're constantly fighting. We're constantly doing things. Again, this is not someone who just woke up and said, I'm running for office. Like, we live this. We do this. My campaign website is www.voteanthonyclark.com. That's CLARK, www.voteanthonyclark.com. It's all power to the people. That's what we truly believe in. And if you believe in this movement, we're asking you to join, to volunteer, to share this video, to share other videos, to spread the message, because it's not about me. It's about us. It's going to take all of us. And as well, if you could come out and door knock, come out with me, see the community. Coming up, I'm walking the entire district. So I'm starting in Inglewood and walking from Inglewood to Hillside, and I'm going to Facebook Live throughout, and I believe that's June 9th, to expose. Come out and walk with me. Come out and door knock, phone bank. And if you have $1 or $2, and trust, I know it's a struggle. I'm living check to check. We work extremely hard for our money. But again, as a grassroots candidate, 100% grassroots, we count on donations. So $1, $5, $10, $20 truly means the most. And if someone who donates, you're not just wasting that money, because I guarantee you, again, I'm giving my life to this. So we appreciate donations as well.
Anthony Clark, that's a good note to end it on. Thank you so much for joining Heartlands Media. Hey everyone, did you like that video? Well, guess what? You can hit the subscribe button, hit that ring bell notification, so that way you're updated when we upload new content to our YouTube channel.